You know, the good part about having a day off and not having a schedule on your day off is when you wake up in the morning, you can take your time getting out of the bed. You can sit here and pray, you can meditate, you can think about things, think about your blessings, you could think about, you know, what you have, what you don't have, in a good way, and you could just take your time. You don't have to rush and do things. So, that's what I'm kind of doing today on my day off. And of course, another message came from Spirit, and I wanted to share that with you guys. And this is about worker mentality versus a management mentality. And I want to talk a little bit about that, and I hope it serves you. Now, for those of you who already know, I've been in a position of both management mentality and worker mentality. Working in the office, managing things in the office, you take on a lot. And being in a management position, you have to think about the needs of the company as well as the employees. And it takes a lot of mental energy. It really does. It takes a lot of time. In addition to the time that you put in at work, it takes a lot of planning and organization. And it also requires a lot of communication among people. And you're dealing with a lot of different people from different backgrounds. You have to take a lot of factors into account. It's not easy. And sometimes it's hard, and sometimes it's a blessing, and it's a blessing sometimes financially because you're compensated well for it. And sometimes it's a blessing, as far as your status, because you might be able to make the right connections with the right people because you're in management. You're able to be introduced to different opportunities because you're in management, which is good. So it comes with its perks. It does. But there's a trade-off. There was a phrase, and I'm paraphrasing, that, with great privilege comes great responsibility. And I mean, there is nothing more true about that. You're not going to get something for nothing, and that's just the way it is. So when you're a manager, and if you want to be a good manager, you have to have a certain mentality and understand that once you acquire that position, that you are going to have additional responsibilities. You're going to have to make certain adjustments, and you're going to have to shift your mentality from being a worker to being a manager. You're going to have to shift your mentality in regards to dealing with certain things. And if you're not prepared to do that, then you're going to be a piss poor manager, or you're going to be a manager for a very, very short time. And that's why you hear a lot of cases where you have people who have worked for companies for years in hopes to be a manager. And then once they get into management, they're in management for maybe 6 months to a year. And then all of a sudden, they've gone from management back to being a worker. Because they realized that the thing that they strive for was nothing like what they envisioned it to be once they got the position. I remember watching a skit, and this is one of my favorite YouTube creators, Floss the Mac. He plays a character, one of his many characters. Tracy, the CNA, and I'll go ahead and mention the channel because there's so many different skits that Tracy does. And I encourage you to watch it. It's very hilarious. Tracy is a character he plays, and Tracy is a CNA. Well, eventually Tracy has the opportunity to become the DON, which is the director of nursing. And Tracy goes to the classes, and she goes through the training and everything, and boom, she's a director of nursing. And Tracy deserves it. I mean, Tracy has attitude, don't get me wrong. Tracy is a bit ghetto, she's a bit unorthodox, but at the end of the day, Tracy is loyal. Tracy does a hell of a job, has a great rapport with the patients, knows policies back and forth, and she's just on point. I mean, she's the best worker that's at the nursing home, and she knows procedure, and she also did some private duty as well. The skits are hilarious, but at the end of the day, overall, Tracy knows her shit. Okay. And Tracy was director of nursing for a while. In the beginning, you're kind of rooting for Tracy, especially if you've been watching the skits for a while. You're like, man, Tracy has stepped up because Tracy's a single parent. She's got the baby daddy drama going on and everything. So she's trying to do the best she can for her kids to kind of level up. So you're rooting for Tracy because Tracy's got the DON position and everything. And she's doing fine so far. But then you start to see some of the headaches that are associated with the DON position, and it finally got to the point where it started to wear her down, and she did a final skit, and it was a very short one, basically, where she was on the phone with one of her girlfriends, basically saying, you know what, it's more stress doing this than it was being a CNA. She said, I'm going to go ahead and just fire myself, and I'm going to resign, and I'm going to go back. And her friend was like, are you crazy? You was DON and da-da-da-da-da. See, her friend had worker mentality. Her friend couldn't understand why Tracy wanted to give up the management position. See, for Tracy, when Tracy was a worker, and if you watch the skits, you would see where Tracy was always going head-to-head with the nurses, the lead nurses, and the DONs about how come they're not doing this for the workers and everything else. And if she was the lead, she would do this, that, and the other. But when the opportunity came where she was able to do those things, she found that it was harder to implement those things than she thought that they would be. And she saw the pressures that those people had to deal with. Even though she did do a better job than they did when they were in those positions, she still found the pressures to be very, very difficult, and found that it was less stressful for her to just be a worker. Okay? Yes, she did have leadership qualities, but she just didn't realize how much mental energy was involved in being a leader. And that's what happens with people sometimes. You could want something for years and years and years and years and years and think, boy, if it was me, I would do so and so and so and so and so and so. How many times in your life have you wanted something for a long period of time, and then the minute you get it, you realize it was a hell of a lot more responsibility than you thought it was, and then you finally realize that you were not ready for it? We've all been there, people. And that's what happens. So when you see that situation happens, I think that it's probably better that she went ahead and did that, as opposed to some cases, and we've heard some of these cases recently, where we have some managers where they are too proud to admit that they can't deal with the pressures, and instead of demoting themselves or going to find another job just to maintain their sanity, they let things get next to them, and the stress overwhelms them to the point where they do something detrimental. And when I mean detrimental, you guys know what I mean. We've seen this. We've seen the horror stories in the media about managers who have reached their limits because they can't deal with the pressures. So let's talk about the workers. We have some people on the flip side of this who talk about, oh, well, I'm not going to bother with being no manager. They always have something negative to say about the managers, and then they need to do this, and they need to do that, and they know all the inside of everything and the upside about everybody. But they never apply for anything, because deep down they know that they couldn't handle any of the responsibilities. They wouldn't know the first thing about managing what they're complaining about. But they'll come in and do their job. And you know what? 5 years from now, they're going to be doing and talking about the same thing. 10 years from now, they're going to be doing and talking about the same thing, and that's going to be the way it's going to be until they either quit, die, or retire. That's what workers do, people. So there's responsibility on both ends. Understand that there is pride in all work. There is respect in all work. If you want to be a manager, be a manager. Be a good one. If you want to be a worker, be a worker. Be a good one. But let's not get so hung up on titles that we feel that one thing is going to be better for the other. One might be better for the other on paper, but that might be the extent of it. Your quality of life might go from bad to worse if you become a manager. You might not have as much time as you did before. You might not be able to do the things that you were able to do before. You might not be able to have the freedom that you've had before. You may have a bigger paycheck, but you might not be able to even take the time to spend it the way that you were able to spend your paychecks before when you were a worker. Money sitting in the bank, but it's just sitting there because you only even have time to spend it on the things you need to spend it on. You may not get the sleep that you used to get. There's a trade-off. Worker, yes, you're getting less money. So you may not be able to get the fancier car because you have a lower salary. You may not be able to take the fancier vacation as opposed to some of the management. You may not be able to buy the more expensive clothes. Your children have to go to public school instead of private school. The trade-offs, people. You have to decide what is comfortable for you. But understand, there are responsibilities in being a worker. There are responsibilities in being a manager. And you have to decide what works for you. What sacrifices are you willing to make? And what you're willing to live with. What are you comfortable with in your life? And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. Peace.